I'm so over this. Like, how many times now have I just talked about Godzilla and the fact that he's not a horror movie? Oh my god.
He is, and you even went on about how much of a horror movie he is. He's on your list of horror movie symbols and an allegory, bitch.
He's not. Godzilla, in my mind, will never be a horror movie. Fact.
Okay.
Okay, well, we are recording, so.
Doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
I want everybody to hear. I don't give a fuck who's here. You are rather horror. You got me fucked up. This podcast has got my head fucked around. Godzilla, the SLAB. Hey, what up, everybody? You're listening to take 2 of this fucking episode. This episode is an allegory for what a mess the fucking world is. This is a joke right here.
Alright, okay, look, listen, we're gonna come clean. You're listening to The SLAB, an episode once a month where we do some shit, we postulate, because we love some postulation, because postulating is good, and we postulate ourselves before thee at a selection process thou hath madeth. And, yeah, symbolism and horror and shit.
Yeah, I do it all the time. That's why I've got a huge right arm and a limp left one. Okay, so yes, today we're talking about symbolism and horror. Again. I'm talking about a very Twin Peaks experience over here. Just give us a fucking minute. This has been a fucking joke.
Oh, God.
I'm Lee. Hi, I'm Lee, and I've fucking had it.
Officially. And you know what? I'm Nathan because, yeah, I'm the anal bead that lives inside of Godzilla that makes him angry. And I am so angry right now because we literally recorded the first, 15, 20 minutes of this episode, and it fucking froze. I'm so annoyed.
Yeah, everything went to shit. And
we did your selection and everything went to shit.
Yeah. Pretty much fuck podcasting, and the podcast is over. Bye.
Okay, alright, real talk. So we want to make this very clear. When we are talking about symbolism and horror, we don't specifically mean like, oh, look over there, that's what that means, and this and all of that. I think you had a whole spiel about like what this actually means, so I'll let you do the whole talking front.
Yeah, okay, so like basically I didn't know exactly what you were going to go down either, so I was kind of like, right, should I go very academic and be like, what does, like, everybody knows about like the bisexual lighting, or the like very like blue, red, like what do certain lightings mean, what do certain camera angles mean, what did I say, like what does a cup turned on a 30-degree angle facing a window instead of facing on a evening, what does that mean, you know, like. But no, we're going to make it a little bit more accessible and kind of easier to digest, I guess. So we're going to be getting in today about what certain characters mean, what certain characters represent, and why people are the worst thing to ever happen to the earth.
Yeah, we want to sort of deep dive into like not necessarily the superficial parts of films, like, oh, that's an Easter egg over there. We want to talk about more so the deeper meanings of films, the allegories, like you were saying, and really just kind of give it to you and hopefully like change your perspective on certain things, specifically with horror, obviously, but hopefully changing your perspective and your outlook on certain films that make you think, I never actually thought of it like that before. And yeah, so I believe you want to talk about the horror yet not horror of the 1940s and 50s. Go ahead, deep dive, bitch.
First and foremost, I want to say denial is not just a river in Egypt, Nathan. You're wrong. So So this has been kind of a long-standing, like even pre they're here, the SLAB, all that stuff. This has been kind of an outstanding like debate between Nathan and I. Just going to get it out of the way. I think the original King Kong and the original Godzilla movies are horror movies because they're creature features and they very definitely are very like representative of things. So I'm just going to jump into Godzilla real quick. So Godzilla is basically the manifestation of nuclear war, nuclear genocide. I say Nagasaki, but make it fashion. That's so horrible. Shut it down. So yeah, we might cut that.
No, we won't.
It was literally had me calling Sophie a greasy dyke the other day. So, get it together. I just slapped myself in the face. Wake up, Pearl. So, Godzilla is an allegory for nuclear horror and basically just like a physical manifestation of the rage and anger and sadness that the Japanese people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki felt after those attacks, and was basically a good way to show plain and simple, because people didn't think that they were doing anything wrong when that happened, and it's like, here's what you've made us feel. Here's the physical manifestation of how we feel, which is this huge creature that has nuclear power, that goes on then to destroy these cities in Japan, only to be destroyed at the end. And yeah, I think it's odd now that Godzilla has now become a hero, a figure kind of been reclaimed by Japan in a way. Same with King Kong. I'll just touch very, very lightly on King Kong. Or do you have anything to say about Godzilla before we move on a little bit?
Well, I do think, like, because first of all, when it came to watching Godzilla and of all the like subsequent sequels and spin-offs and all that kind of thing, I never kind of really got the whole nuclear vibe, but once you sort of delve deeper into it, you really do get this sense of the deeper meanings and the deeper levels, the complexities, should we say. Like, during this podcast, we're going to tease out a lot of complexities with different films and things like this, but this is definitely one of them where you can definitely see the fear, the rage, and also the despair, because number one, obviously Godzilla gets it in the end, but you get a lot of this animosity between the East and the West, specifically with like Godzilla, that you can definitely feel, because number one, it's almost a direct reference to the Hiroshima bombings and the Nagasaki bombings. So it can be very easily misinterpreted as just a creature feature, but if you are looking to really kind of see in a way how like these sort of deeper horrible actions that happened via the Americans, and also the Americans actually have this monopoly on it as well. They see Godzilla as this huge creature, wow, blah blah, but in reality, like it's one of their greatest fears. Like, I think in the 1930s to like the 1950s, there was a huge threat of nuclear attacks, nuclear warfare on American soil, or maybe not even just nuclear war, but bombings on nuclear soil, hence Pearl Harbor and all of that kind of thing. But you also get like across state lines, there were huge citywide blackouts. People would turn off all of the lights. Communication would go dead. In the dark, they would pull down the curtains. Everything would go silent for fear of nuclear resistance or bombing attacks. So it's a very consistent fear, and it only makes sense that Godzilla has over time become a bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger threat, because before man got wise, before man became wise and learned how to accept his fellow man, we learned how to pollute on a catastrophic scale. We learned how to kill each other off in mass genocidal bombings and killings. So, like, it only makes sense that this fear, considering, how nuclear is becoming more and more of an issue nowadays, specifically with warfare, that it only makes sense that those created by it would get bigger and bigger and bigger, because historically, Godzilla has only gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, so it makes sense.
Yeah, the biggest being, I think, Planet Godzilla, Earth Eater Godzilla, which is basically like Godzilla after. It's an anime. It's basically Godzilla after all the world has been like decimated, and he's literally like unimaginably, like unimaginably. Can't even speak. Excuse me. He's like incomprehensibly big, like bigger than like any mountain big, like much bigger than any mountain big, and that's only after everything else has been wiped out. But I just want to touch on very quickly, I think horror, and this is why I do consider these two movies horror, just because I think horror has the kind of luxury and the license to kind of touch on subject matter like this and not make it so literal, whereas you could have just a straight up movie about Hiroshima and Nagasaki and just have it be exactly what happened, or you can kind of turn it around and make it easier for people to digest, like, oh fuck, like what was done here was monstrous. And again, like I said last time, you'll come to find that a lot of these monsters and a lot of these allegories are all allegories and allegorical for human, like horrors, for human monstrosities. You know, I think like creatures are a very good way, and we'll touch on that throughout this episode. A lot of my notes are very creature specific and what those kind of represent, and how they speak to certain situations. I think, yeah, horror is very lucky in that way. To be able to express things creatively and make things like be able to be understood by people in not so much of a very literal way. Because I think a lot of people have a very hard time being told, like, look, people did this very fucked up thing almost for no reason. You know, but it's like if you have kind of a creature to manifest and to kind of bound around, you know, it's easier to understand and it's kind of easier to take and understand. But also, yeah, humans are ultimately the worst thing. Yeah. In like basically all these. It's always kind of humans behind it. So just quickly, I wanted to move on to King Kong, because those two are very tied together in my head. So King Kong is, in my head, like very much so an allegory for America's relationship with slavery and race relations. And like made quite early as well, made before the Civil Rights Movement, all of that stuff. 1933, the original King Kong came out. And the allegories in that I feel like are much clearer than they are in Godzilla, because we have this American crew going over to film a movie, and they're exploiting everybody. They're exploiting Andara also, the great Fay Ray. And we get it very obviously, like very clearly made to us when we see King Kong in chains. King Kong is being transported from his native land to New York in chains, and this really calls forth the imagery of human zoos, the image of slaves in chains on a boat being stacked up with each other, and kind of the outsiders' treatment of native people of other lands, you know. And I think like that still kind of rings very clear now. I think like that allegory still very much stands, and I think it's a beautiful way to interpret it, though. You know, like get something up.
I would definitely agree with you, specifically with when it comes to how the real kind of villains of these, specifically these two films, especially these two films, I should say, really are human beings. Excuse me. Get a little choked up here. So, yeah, my kind of take on this film, like I said, is definitely very much so that experience of the black experience in America, where, like you said, very literally coming from, I mean, specifically Africa, but in this case Skull Island, where everyone is like you. You with Kong, you have the symbiotic relationship between him and the natives of that land, and almost sort of the deification of Kong. And then you have a monopoly on that when he's taken back and he's literally displayed in chains, like you said, and almost like to these white rich people in the audience as if he's being sold off in a slave market.
Yeah.
And I just think like it's a very big, obvious image that if you don't get it, you're sort of a moron, because it's very clearly stated, like you said, like it's more overt in that way, where this white capitalist comes in and essentially kills off black people, the experience, the slave trade, all of that. And especially like how the film ends, Kong is literally chained up. He escapes. As he escapes, he is shot to death and he dies. So it's a huge, especially nowadays, this kind of sort of rise when it comes to the Black Lives Matter and cops and things like that, that this film only becomes more relevant as time goes by. And obviously, especially for the time, like you said, it was before the civil rights movement and all of that, but especially now, like, you can draw the parallels very easily between Kong's experience, the black experience, and how white America has essentially destroyed individualism and culture because of how the white experience tends to just take and appropriate as much as possible, and then leaves nothing and then moves on to another thing,
Exactly. And I think like we both have notes that I think will touch on the kind of horror of assimilation, kind of hinting back to our last episode with the faculty. Just very quickly, I wanted to say that oh my god, my mind just went so blank there. They say like at the end there, when Kong is lying on the New York street just below the Empire State Building, that I think somebody says to Carl down, the main character, like the actual filmmaker, the airplane's got him, and he's like, no, 'twas beauty that killed the beast. And it's like, well, no, it was the airplanes that shot him down off the building, and made him fall all the way off the Empire State Building.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can see that like, and it is actually quite ahead of its time, for like symbolically, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That scene where Kong is kind of breaking out, you can see that and like all of these people are very shocked, very, very shocked at what is happening. And it's like, you can kind of see that again as a kind of physical manifestation of the rage of Native people for how they've been treated, And that kind of, I think, can be allegorical for Native people anywhere, almost especially in America.
Yeah.
America really, you can't really sit well on stolen land. Shit is just never going to go right for you.
I suppose then that's a really kind of good segue to move into probably one of the biggest kind of allegorical stories for the genocide of Native America, which is The Shining.
Yeah.
Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, like, not as, I wouldn't say as overtly as King Kong, but Stanley Kubrick's The Shining is, drop after drop after drop of all of these little tidbits of things where, and it's very strategically hidden underneath this sort of like the hotel is the evil thing, but you can very clearly see so many overt references and so many different things. Like, this was an allegory for the genocide of Native Americans and First Nations people. It really was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we get a lot. Like, Stanley Kubrick is actually very good with that. Where this is very much so like you have to read into it a little bit.
Yeah.
I've seen lots of things that the blood elevator is symbolic of, is directly symbolic of the genocide of the people. I believe is the people of the tribe that's referenced in The Shining. We also get the cans in the back that do have the Calumet like face on it with like the logo and stuff, Yeah. And there's a lot. Actually, The Shining, I feel like, is one of those that's kind of almost all symbolic. There's a lot of people have debated back and forth about like whether everything that's just slightly phallic shaped is supposed to represent represent like male dominance and male rage and all that kind of stuff. And I actually never noticed until you said at that time, in a Shining retrospective, that in the first interview when it's not Grady, it's
with the hotel manager.
Yeah. The printer.
Yeah.
Fucking cock on it.
The printer literally turns into an erect penis. Coming straight
purpose,
out,
I don't put on Stanley Kubrick. I feel like Stanley Kubrick was very much so one of those people that it's like, if it's on screen, I fucking meant it to be there.
Yeah.
You know?
Very much so.
Over his entire life afterwards. And like, yeah, I feel like even like the hotel itself is like the isolation. It's very symbolic of Jack and Wendy's relationship, you know? Like he's up there kind of specifically to find himself, you know, and ultimately gets more lost than he ever was, you know, up in this place that's literally in the middle of nowhere. Like they're like physically and emotionally isolated from each other, you know, and the snow, the fact that they can't go anywhere, the fact that all the vehicles are destroyed, it really just kind of wink, nudge, but like very hard, you know, like, get it? Get it? You know?
Yeah. One thing in particular I really wanted to actually bring up was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Tobe Hooper's original film. Now there's two sort of deeper symbolic meanings of this film. One you came up with, and the other was this film would be more sort of personal to me, considering my beliefs when it comes to the killing of animals and the eating of meat. So my belief is this is specifically about becoming a vegetarian, and this film is about being vegetarian and the belief system that you have, because when you go through that film, there's so many sort of slight digs and slight nods to, literally one of the opening shots is cattle in a abattoir farm. As the bus goes by, the heat of the Texas sun is there, constantly sweltering. Literally the fact that when one of those teens is brought in, he walks literally into a metal door and is smacked over the head with a hammer, and he's in utter shock. He literally shaking. And he's pulled in. Yeah,
so good.
It's almost like a snuff film.
Where like pig noises at that same time. We hear squealing, and we're kind of forced to associate humans with animals, and not just with animals, but with meat.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Which is weird. Again, it's kind of like humans have this weird sense of holding some animals as more important than others. You know, like I would never eat a dog, but I will totally eat a chicken.
Yeah.
You know, it's humans have a very fucked up complex about meat and about animals and how we view them or respect them.
Like if you want even more of a bigger kind of like nudge, wink, kind of thing, he literally, Leatherface literally wears an apron. He holds the hammer. He brings the guy in and he sticks him into an ice box. One of them is stuck up onto hooks. They literally turn them into food, and they forcibly make what's her name? I forget her character's name now. Sally. They literally like force feed her stuff, and then she ends up being at the hammer's end of the grandfather character by the bucket. So yeah. So it's literally like if you want to view it as just a simple horror film, totally fine, but I choose to view it as sort of almost like a PSA for vegetarianism.
It's very
yeah, I know you have a different opinion of this film. I think you kind of drew a different kind of allegorical symbolization from this.
Just to touch very, very quickly on what you did just say, though, it is weird because it's like the Sawyers in that movie almost represent this kind of, it almost is like a PSA, like a like a vegan militia in a weird way. They're so vegan that they're willing to eat people, you know. it's very much so this thing that it's like, well, we treat animals this way, or like we're not treating you any other way. Like the people in this movie, if they were a pig or a cow, nobody would think of this as a horror movie.
Yeah.
But because it's people being treated in this way, it's, oh fuck, it's shocking. How could you treat somebody like this? These people are murderers. You know, I say this fully being a meat eater. Yeah, I like that kind of PSA, and I've actually heard you're not like the first person to definitely draw this comparison. I know, like, I've met a couple of people who have like gone vegetarian because of this movie. I think even Toby Hooper himself said that he stopped eating meat for a couple of weeks. Also, Guillermo del Toro said he went vegetarian for a long time after seeing this movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a great comparison. But my kind of read on this, along with yours, I don't disagree with you, obviously. My reading is that this is also kind of an allegory about class and how people view poor people or people from more rural areas or people who are more impoverished. Because that's the thing. The Sawyer family in this movie only eat human meat out of desperation because they've all been fired from their jobs, which was working in meat, like in the meat factories and stuff. And we get initial hesitation from the main characters who actually are from here. Sally and Franklin are from this area. This is like their family plot, but they've since moved to the city as children and come back to kind of find their roots because I believe it's their grandfather's grave they're going to see. And these people have kind of hang-ups about these people from the country because they're poor and they're dirty and they're different. Even it's not Chop Top. It's the hitchhiker, who could be read as kind of like mentally ill in a way. You know, they all kind of are like, oh, they're like really terrified of this man. I get he is like cutting himself and all this kind of stuff like that, but I think like even initially, before he starts being weird, they're all still very like, this dude is dirty. He like has bad vocabulary. He is poor, you know. I think like this can definitely be read, and we get this a lot. We get this in like Deliverance or any of the Texas Chainsaw movies, any of the Hills Have Eyes movie. There's this weird hatred and kind of like poking and laughing at poor people or rural people.
Yeah,
that is in movies, you know. Even the same in like Wrong Turn, it's like we're just to assume that these people are fucking gross because they're from the country or because they're poor or because they're illiterate, whatever it may be.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
And like I'll touch on it again later when we get kind of we get more kind of invasion-y kind of thingies people use to certain people and how allegories can be made that way.
I've been speaking of sort of societal issues and things like that. What I really, really think is such kind of a big, specifically doing to do with like feminism, misogyny, all of that kind of thing, or not even to do with feminism, but anti-feministic views, right? I tend to think like there are a few films that always kind of pop into my head. One of them in particular is Rosemary's Baby. This film is a huge societal, like almost anti-feminist norm enforcing film. Because apart from the whole kind of, you know, if you extract the fact that she is having Satan's baby, she is Satan's baby mama. Yeah, yeah. So like you can literally just view it as society pushing so much of their own normative views on a woman who simply wants to like live her life in a way that she wants to do it. And yet you get literally the society of people living in the same apartment block as her. Her own husband is literally selling her out in order to get ahead in life of literally anyone, you know. And it's just it's really strong. It's a heavy movie. Yeah, and especially because it was in, I think it was the 70s, was it? That this film
69.
came out? 69. So like you literally have the rise of the feminist movement, the feminist manifesto, literally on the rise there, because we had the 60s was what? The emancipation of the class system, the pill, all of these kinds of things were really coming into effect.
Like Dynamo and all that. This is like first wave feminism. This is like the quote unquote dawn of the, quote unquote, like bra burning feminists, you know, like kind of the original wave, which like a lot of people kind of disagree with now because like times haven't changed. But Rosemary's Baby is a great allegory that way because like basically she's just used in that movie as a kind of
as a breeding vessel. That's
exactly,
all she's seen as.
And then like again, like I always say, like, well, at the end of the movie, it's like, well, kind of good for her. Like it all works out for her because like, what better side are you to be on than like literally like the devil being in your corner? Like they make it a thing where they're like, well, Rosemary, you should be so lucky. I mean, he chose you out of every woman in the world. You know, basically being like, kind of shut up and just like deal with what you've been given, what like we all have given you. And the weird fucked up part about that movie is that most of the people doing this shit to her are also women. You know, it's crazy. And yeah, it's not even an allegory for rape. She is just straight up raped in that movie by the devil, you know. I also wanted to mention, kind of on the topic of rape and kind of gender issues, I guess. Alien is hugely symbolic. First of all, just the design, H.R. Giger's design, is incredibly phallic, and tall and long and lean. And then we get the kind of first stages where we get the face hugger, which is vaginal in appearance, and at first attacks a man first. Mostly attacks men in these movies.
Literally male rape.
Exactly. It turns the Rosemary's Baby thing on its head by turning it against a man and have it be rape and male reproduction rather than, and it's forced. All of it is forced, you know. Same even kind of like with Predator in a way. For I mean, the name alone, that like creature is also kind of extremely vaginal and extremely kind of sexual looking, you know. And I don't think any of that is by accident, you know. One of Giger's designs, the Predator was designed by Stan Winston, not Giger. Just let's not get it twisted. These things are like very much so on purpose, and it's weird. It's like this weird subconscious thing that like everybody is supposed to kind of like baseline have some weird fear of sex in a way, you know, or like weird fear of something. It's always just something that I feel like is kind of implanted in people's brains from the time that they're young, you know. And seeing these things, like, it's unmistakable. The xenomorph is a cock. It's a cock, you know. And these men, this movie being attacked by a vaginal monster, being raped, it turns it all on its head. You know, and then the forced birth, not just the being raped part, it's the being raped and being forced to deliver a baby, which kind of touches on like the Handmaid's Tale kind of thing, like the idea of women for so long just being forced to be mothers and that's it, without any kind of choice, you know. And then the ultimate kind of bad in that movie, well, in Aliens, ends up being a queen, you know. She's a woman. So Alien teaches us to hate women. Joking, but also Sigourney Weaver in that movie, that character was not written to be female, and I think it works so well that she's the only one that lives at the end. Spoiler alert! It's like, oh, it was Alien Day the other day.
35 years, I think.
It's not the anniversary. It's just Alien Day.
Yeah, but it's shut up. It's anniversary to me, so.
It's not an anniversary. It's Alien Day because it was 426. LV-426 is the planet they land on in the first Alien movie. It's how it's built.
Okay. So I just want to kind of like backtrack a little bit. I had one other thing to say about the whole kind of societal men versus women sort of kind of deeper issue there. Another one I really kind of consistently think of when it comes to the class system and societal norms that are pressed upon women was the 1975 Stepford Wives. That was
Oh yes. Oh yes.
100%. Like, I mean, if you want sort of like a very kind of, I don't want to say anti-feminist, but it is, because the plot is anti-feminism in a way. Like, look no further than the 1975 original. No, I don't particularly like the Nicole Kidman one, because that's but I love the 1975 version. And if you want to look no further, literally turning men's wives into robots, literal robots, for birthing, cleaning, cooking, all of these types of things. And if you want to have another thing, the main the female lead in the film, she is a photographer, and she's taking consistent pictures, so we're seeing the world through her view and how it should be seen, and how life should be. But when it comes to her husband literally sets her up to become a robot. He literally tries to put her down, get rid of her own job, and send her on a way of just becoming a literal birth canal. And it's crazy. It's so crazy when you like draw up these parallels between films and things like that. You know, it's overtly feminist in a way, but also overtly anti-feminist because of the plot of the film, if that makes sense.
Well, the entire point of feminism is that like women should be able to do these things if they want to, and the entire point of Stepford Wives is that they're being forced to.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the thing. I feel like there was no point in remaking Stepford Wives, especially into like, what was it? It was like 2007 or some shit like that. You know,
Yeah.
the Nicole Kidman is kind of whack.
Yeah.
Because they end up having like Stepford husbands in it as well, where like one of them is gay, and I'm like, no, like you're kind of detracting from the point. The point is that it's supposed to be a man-woman thing. Fuck gay people. I can say right now. No, but seriously, I think like that's very much so a product of its time. Like just coming out just after, kind of the first wave feminism, where it's like, where women are kind of being told, and people are really trying to secure the idea that it's like women belong in the kitchen, women stay home, women should be mothers, and women should do the shopping and the cooking and the cleaning and all this kind of stuff, which is all fine if a woman chooses to do so. That's what the original point of feminism is all supposed to be about, is freedom of choice.
Yeah.
You know, and to be turned into a robot, not just a robot, but like a robot specifically designed for men's ease of life, for men. Yeah, exactly. It's really fucked up, but also it's kind of what was happening.
Yeah, it's true.
Also what's been happening for a long time. And again, just very quickly, I like that horror can do these things, can make these things more obvious. Things like terrible things are not always obvious in real life, and to kind of just push them to the front and make them a 700-foot tall monster or a literal robot with a Dior waistline on, it just makes things much clearer for people to see, you know. And I think that's what you're touching on at the start, by saying like I would like this episode to kind of not exactly change your mind, but give you like the tool to rewatch these movies again
with a different eye.
Exactly, and like look at it through a different lens and see what these movies actually mean. Because I don't think it ruins them. I think it makes them all the more horrific when you actually realize what they're trying to say. You know.
Yeah, I really do. I think, like you just said, like horror definitely has that way. It almost has that, like, I want to say horror is given a certain liberty to put across a theme, but do it in the strangest way possible, and that's why you can love it, because you can still take it extremely seriously while having a lot of fun with it, you know.
Exactly. It's just, I think like horror is very lucky in that way, in a way that I don't think other genres actually are at all. Horror has the kind of the freedom, the artistic license to kind of do whatever it wants in other ways that like other movies or other genres just simply cannot. You know?
Yeah. So one thing I kind of wanted to quickly go through, we've spoken immensely about this film already and its sophomore film, but I wanted to touch on Hereditary, specifically because this film, I think we both universally agree on the fact that it is about dealing with grief in the worst way possible, versus Ari Aster's sophomore film Midsommar, which is dealing with grief in the best way possible. You know what I mean?
Like burning all your bridges on your fucking piece of shit boyfriend. Yeah.
So I just want to touch on these two films because, number one, not only are they fucking just great films, and you and I could literally talk about these for fucking years, but I wanted to draw a few...
Our 3.5-hour long Hereditary episode.
Yeah. But I did want to just very quickly draw the parallels between Hereditary's notion of dealing with grief and Midsommar's notion of dealing with grief, and also the anxiety of separation. So Hereditary is, in case you haven't fucking seen this movie, go fucking watch it, because fucking great movie.
And then listen to our review.
And listen to our retrospective on it. So Hereditary deals with a family who is consistently dealing with the death of family members, i.e. a grandmother and a daughter. This sort of, the way that everything is dealt with, it's dealt behind closed doors. It's not said at all until it's spoken about, and then there's an explosion. Nothing is ever resolved, and it ultimately leads to the downfall of the family. The family is broken up in literally the worst way possible. They all die. So, unless you count Payman being in the young kid's body, in which case then you're totally fine. Hail Payman! And then
just like in the background.
Yeah. Horns and all.
Yeah, there's like a camel with like a thing in the back.
Yeah. Whereas if you were to juxtapose that position of dealing with grief to real life, the way, at least we could say it from at least the Irish point of view, is you deal with grief in a way that you try to console each other, at least to a point of getting on with the day, right? Yeah. Then you get to the wake, the funeral, and then eventually drinks later in the pub, and then you eventually start to feel better. You never fully let go, but you do. You don't necessarily move on, but you do try to get on with your life as best you can. And Hereditary forcibly, almost in your face, forcibly tells you, do not do it like this, otherwise you'll end up like the family. This is how you will end up. You will literally tear yourselves apart mentally. Whereas Midsommar, when I seen Midsommar the first time, I was like, oh yeah, this is very much separation anxiety, and this is very much dealing with grief in a positive way. Because number one...
Good for her.
Yeah, good for her. Literally burning bridges, you know? And then also the anxiety of like pressures, like, you know, relationship pressures and all of that kind of thing. And I really do. I feel for Danny for most of this film, because, like, I've seen those types of things. I've dealt with them before, all of that kind of thing. Plus, it's the best fucking way for you to, like, if you've never done acid or if you've never smoked weed or whatever, this is, like, one of the best ways for you to, like, fucking really, like, experience drugs without taking the drugs.
Oh, you know, Midsommar is, like, no joke, like, one of the more accurate, like, hallucinogenic, like, representations I've seen in film. Even like the anxiety of it and stuff like that, like it can make people very nervous. And Danny's initial trip, it's very that, you know, like it really does like show, like this may not be the right way to deal with it, you know, or it works. This works for some people, but not everybody, you know. Yeah. I think there's I think Midsommar, yeah, it's very much so like if they're like the dark and light version of each other. You know, it's like here's grief. Grief is the main character in both of these movies, and I think Midsommar is it's about somebody who really needs therapy and goes all the way to Sweden and gets like a very big group therapy session.
Yeah.
Because Midsommar, it's basically like sometimes you need to let certain people go, and obviously it's done in a fantastical way by everybody she arrived with is dead by the end. But it's kind of, yeah, it's allegorical for like sometimes you need to let people go, and sometimes the people that are in your life are not the right people for you. And sometimes you find people in the strangest places. Like we get that kind of that's kind of made more clear in the scenes where everybody is sharing emotion. Like for the Atastupa, where we see everybody is grieving at the same time, everybody is making like the noises at the same time, and kind of none more so than when Danny sees Christian fucking that little redheaded girl, and she starts crying kind of hysterically, and she almost can't breathe, and all those women come in and they all look her in the eye and they all cry with her and like basically tell her without saying like, we feel you, like we hear you, we also feel your pain, and we're sharing your pain. And that to me is what makes Danny heal. That's like what Danny needed, because ultimately she was left with no family and only these people that she arrived with. And yeah, the symbolic burning of Christian at the end, it's basically like, let go of toxic shit in your life. You don't need that shit in your life. And obviously I've seen so much debate. I've been in more than one heated debate over like whether or not Danny was the actual villain. I'll just say here what I said on there. Midsummer's not a documentary. Get the fuck over it. Let that girl burn her fucking boyfriend if she wants to. She needed that. Good for her. You leave that little fucking girl alone. And also, just want to move off of Midsummer. There's kind of a weird sexual thing going on in that movie where a lot of it is actually based around sex, kind of like subtly, but we none more so than when we see the end. When everything is said and done, when she's in the full May Queen slug outfit, the flowers around her head after she kisses Pele and after she's interacting with Pele, they start pulsing, and that's very indicative of a lady feeling, I guess. Danny had a white on. Let's just say Danny had to wring out her underwear afterwards.
Oh my god.
Whatever, I would too. Penny was cuter than Christian.
Jesus Christ.
He's not my human chair of the week, though. He's not that cute.
We only do that on Their Hair podcast. Every week, every Friday, 12 p.m.
I'm still interested.
It pays to advertise.
A girl's gonna eat, and it's not gonna eat itself.
Oh my god! Okay, moving very quickly on from that, let's talk about race a little more.
Sure.
So, we did touch a little bit on whether it was intentional or unintentional ending to Night of the Living Dead, and I do believe now it was intentional, specifically because of Dwayne's input to the ending of that film, where a black man is shot by police. That racial tension there is very much obvious, and I said this to you, even the moment when Barbara literally puts eyes on Dwayne's character, I've forgotten his name now, like where he literally turns around and she literally looks him up and down as if to say, oh, you know,
there's a black guy in here.
Yeah, so I just want to kind of lightly touch on that, but what I do really want to talk about is, number one, the very obvious tensions of Get Out. This film is, like, I mean, if you've been living under a rock, like, you wouldn't know what this film really is about, but girl, please, I mean...
This movie has a couple of layers that we're going to need to Jordan Peele back.
Oh...
No, this man did his fucking research, and there was so many times in this movie where it's that Leonardo DiCaprio meme from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where he's like sitting there with a beer and the cigarette, and he's like, oh, it's this, you know. Go ahead, I'll like pick up if you like haven't got the things that I think I was going to say.
So I mean, like, there's really only kind of one specific instance, and then, I mean, like, drawing out the racial tensions of this film is, like, you could cut the tension, like, with literally every scene with a fucking cheese knife. That's how much tension, without, like, even putting horror into the film. Like, you literally, it's just like, dude, why is that white guy acting like that around Daniel Kaluuya's character? Like, you know, and, like, there's so many things, like, the black experience in America in modern day is so polarizing that, like, that's what seeps into this film in particular. And the one thing I really did want to think, like, if you want a really good, like, Easter egg to, like, literally how deep Jordan Peele goes with this character into the sunken place, when I think his name is it Christopher, Daniel Kaluuya's character?
Chris.
So yeah, so he has been hypnotized, and he's sitting in a chair, and he he literally awakens, and finds, like, bits of the chair, the fluff of the chair, and it's cotton. Okay, let this put out that it's literally cotton. So back in the day, obviously, you would know that on plantations, cotton plantations, slaves were told, pick cotton, and this is how we get money and blah 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 from the slave trade. So I find it so strong and such a powerful image that when he literally picked cotton to free himself, to escape, I think that is a strong and a very powerful image that just flips this whole story on its head just from that one shot of him literally picking the cotton and stuffing it in his ears. How he did it, I don't know, because number one, his wrist was tied to the chair, so unless he, like, really, like, bent his ear down, I don't know how he did it, but I think it's great.
Yeah, no, that movie is littered with things like that. We have his girlfriend in the movie. There's a scene where she's eating cereal, and she's eating her Fruit Loops separate to her milk, i.e. keeping colored away from white.
Yeah.
Also, in that same scene, after Chris has freed himself, like, by way of the cotton in his ears, he picks up a set of buck antlers. And those are very indicative of the names that they would have had for certain types of slaves, for certain categories. A strong male adult black slave would have been referred to as a buck, as in being strong and all that kind of stuff. And to see that symbol turned on its head, so to speak, and used for freedom and used for him to get out. Used for him to get out of the situation. It's very heavy, and I think I just want to say, like, Jordan Peele really did his fucking homework, and it's one of the movies in the past couple of years that really stood out for me for being very symbolic. You know, like, this movie almost didn't even have to be a horror movie. There didn't even have to be a supernatural element to this. But again, it's kind of just it's a physical manifestation of the horror that goes on in the world, you know. And I think it was very, very smart, especially for a debut movie, which I couldn't get over. I can't get over that, like, that's his first movie. Mm-hmm. It's so, and I believe he does the same thing with Us, but Us goes into, it's less specifically about race and more so about humanity in general. Mm-hmm. But Get Out, damn, there's go look up a list of things you missed in Get Out and go watch that movie again, and it really just changes shit up for you. It really blows my mind.
I think I mean, like, also the fact that Chris's character is in a photograph and the father figure is literally auctioning him off to a crowd of white men or white people. Straight up slave imagery. Like, I couldn't believe it, you know. And then literally also the appropriation. I should think about this as well. Literally the appropriation of one's culture or one's experience is also being used in that. If you take it from point of view of the fact that, just like the female lead in Stepford Wives, Chris is a photographer, so you're seeing the world from his point of view, and literally a white man buys him for the fact that he wants his eyes, he wants his point of view. So that literally, like, blows your mind, like, the levels of complexities that are in this film.
And also, speaking of photography, his photography is what snaps one of the guys out of the trance
Yes.
and makes him real and gives him his first hint of the, like, I think he literally says get out. I think that's like the scene where he like grabs him and is like get out, get out. But also, just very quickly before we kind of hop off this, I'm going to say, like, that movie also touches into this weird kind of what I think is very evil, which is like performative activism, where we get a lot of the father in that movie is like, oh, if I could have voted for Obama a third time, I would have. You know, kind of like it shows this like weird side to America where people are like, it's like a false sense of security. It's like a Venus flytrap, like come over here, and then they snap down on you.
Yeah.
You know, it's completely performative, which is, I think, terrifying. It's like, it's almost better to be just evil out front than to be secretly evil.
Yeah.
Because then, like, not to look out for you, you know? Yeah. And it's already too late. He's already there, you know? And I also think the very first scene of that movie, I haven't seen it since it came out. They're driving up the road and they see a dead deer on the side of the road.
Oh no, they hit the deer. They hit it, yeah.
And they get pulled over by police, you know, and he wasn't even driving, and he's only asking to see his license and all that kind of stuff. Again, it's very, very current. But yeah, well done, Jordan Peele. Fucking great movie, filled with symbolism, and I'm like, we couldn't even touch on here. It'll have to be its own episode.
Yeah,
someday.
Yeah. We will retrospect the films that we have spoken about. We will retrospect them. Do not worry. We will tease out the bigger complexities of these stories, of these films. You know, the symbolism that is entirely innate in its creation and comes across to the audience, especially nowadays when you can really look back at things like Last House on the Left, where that was an allegory for Vietnam. Like, all of these things, like, you can really like draw the parallels and then really kind of use them, and there's so much more that is really available to us. So don't worry if you think we're skipping over anything. Don't worry, we will have retrospectives, and we will get to them. We promise you that we will get to them.
Also, like, let us know if you want like a part 2 of this where we delve into like actual, like, not what things stand for, but like actual symbolism in horror.
Yeah.
Like if you want us to get a little bit more academic, like going into like what certain lightings mean, or like I said, what a cup at a 32-degree angle facing a south-facing window on a Wednesday evening means. You know, like, we can get into all of that, because like we can, like, you can always read deeper. You can always read deeper. These are just very surface level.
So I do, just before we kind of sign off here, I do want to really kind of think of we want to have your input. If you have any questions, or if you have any things you want us to talk about, I think it's good to kind of to get your input. So if you have any themes, anything really, I think it's good to let us know. So yeah, for sure, let us know.
We are doing this for you people. Oh, can't say you people. We're doing this for our listeners. Literally anything you want us to hear.
What do you mean, you people?
You hetero cis het bitch. Yeah, literally anything you want to hear us talk about, let us know. It's all for you.
It's all for you. So we have.
I wanted to touch very quickly on like classic monsters. So, like, as in the Wolfman and vampires and ghosts. I think those are very, very symbolic of a lot of things hidden. You know, we got ghosts being symbolic of repressed trauma, repressed of unfinished business. Kind of especially child ghosts in movies. They're very like allegorical of like what has happened to children that they could never move on from. Children have no option. Like, we get things like the Devil's Backbone and, you know, things like this that are like, they speak to a lot. Exactly, yeah. Ghosts have always been used as symbols of repressed trauma in some way, shape, or form. And the Wolfman, or werewolves in general, are typically seen to be a male a male monster, and to me that symbolizes male rage and male repressed sexuality. And kind of the same thing with vampires and even witches. Witches have always been allegorical.
It's almost the opposite, right? It's repressed female sexuality, yeah.
Exactly, and men's fear of female sexuality and female power. That's literally what it is. Once a woman was accused of being a witch, it wasn't because they saw her fly up in the sky. It's because she
spoke out,
was very, or had more money than some people, or lived by herself, you know. And ultimately, like, we can joke about this and stuff, but it's like these things ultimately like cost people their lives, you know. Yeah. Humans are gross.
Yeah, I do think you can very much draw the parallels there for sure, and yeah.
Like, no matter what any of these creatures are, no matter like what any of this is, it all comes back to, if we were to show you how bad humans really were, you just wouldn't get it. So we have to make it something else, something palatable. I think I mentioned this a couple of episodes ago at the Bronx Zoo. I think in like the 30s, had an exhibition of, come see the world's most fearsome and evil creature, and it was just a mirror.
Yeah.
You know, humans are always gross. Too much fuck people. Animals are great.
Godzilla is awesome and a horror movie.
And also, don't turn your wife into a fucking robot. Just be nice and she'll do what you want.
Well, I suppose the last thing we should talk about is the word assimilation. So,
yes.
You can draw quite an amount. The well is deep for the theme of assimilation. You can really, I mean, literally last week, we talked about the faculty, which was literally an overt theme towards assimilation into societal norms, gender norms, sexuality expression norms, all of this kind of thing. So I really just kind of want to touch on that a little bit. I know you have some opinions on this. I have some opinions on this. And then I think you have a different movie to what I have, at least for this one, because I mean, I have Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I thought of The Thing. I also thought of of consumerism and consumption of like media, which is also assimilation, because like the accepting of society through consumerism for like Dawn of the Dead.
Oh, I was going to go Dawn of the Dead or They Live.
They Live, yes. Or The Stuff. You ever see The Stuff?
Oh, The Stuff! Again, I have, you guys can't see, but Nathan can see. I have The Stuff poster on my wall. Can't get enough of The Stuff. It looks so good, though. I would totally eat The Stuff. I don't give a fuck.
I mean, it just looks like marshmallow fluff, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Depending on what scene it's in, it's either marshmallow fluff, Tipex, like just soap, or like yogurt. You know,
I love it.
But it kills you. So.
Well, the whole point that we kind of wanted to talk about assimilation was, well, not only last week did we literally talk about the horror of assimilation, but how very briefly, yes. But like, I really want to like kind of use this as my big finisher, at least anyway, is the importance of being a standout or self-expression, because really the true horror of society is losing your own voice and following what other people say, because once you do that, you cease to become an individual and you just become another brick in the wall, per se. You know what I mean? It really does. It really is one of the biggest horrors. Like, I mean, I always reference the thought process of if crazy was to become so if sane was to flip and the insane were to become the majority, sanity would become the outcast. You know what I mean? So it's very much that, and the thought process behind a film like The Invasion of the Body Snatchers has that exact same thought process. Do as we say, don't express yourself. We don't use anger. We don't have wars. I mean, not having wars would be a great thing, but losing the individuality to simply express yourself or be different, you know, just being not part of a collective mind, a hive mind, and creating your own path in life is more important and almost more frightening than just kind of going with the flow. Is that eventuality of like that abyss below you, but you've got to take the plunge, because if you don't, you'll just be all the assholes at the back still standing there wondering whether they should or shouldn't, you know?
Yeah, you know, very definitely. I agree with you a lot. I think like last week we kind of came at it, like basically had the same point, but kind of came at it from like different angles. That like I felt that the ending of The Faculty, which is basically, again, it's just kind of like a sexy teen version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Very much so is, and that's not a bad thing. I really enjoyed it. I had a good time, even though
Can't be fun
the whole time. Yeah, it's a good time. That I think that the end of that wasn't a happy ending, because ultimately everybody lost what made them them, and they all just became like everybody else in the school, you know. You know, it's like they lost what made them main characters. They changed their style, they changed their friends, they changed their way of dress, everything. And I didn't like that, because I felt at the end assimilation, not just the monster, but assimilation, the idea itself had won. That everybody had given up and given away their individuality and just blended in with everybody, which I think is fucking gross. I think it's horrible. But also, just to kind of go back to Invasion of the Body Snatchers, I think like there's definitely a reason why we basically get a new Invasion movie every 10 years or so, because the fears have changed. Like there's like at the core, the point of Invasion of the Body Snatchers is paranoia, and every couple of years the world's reason for paranoia changes. It might have been in the 60s, it might have been Russians, and then this. I was
and just then that, about to say communism was definitely communism or McCarthyism, because McCarthyism was obviously on the rise back then, where literally everyone was looking over their shoulder at like the person walking by, they're a communist.
Exactly,
you know, that kind of
your
thing.
Neighbor. Exactly, yeah. And I think like though that kind of, we also kind of get that a little bit with Rosemary's Baby, that like fear of paranoia of like I can't trust anyone.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I love it.
I think the fear of totalitarianism, the fear of unity with a hive mind, of just going along with whatever is
1985.
Yeah, it's very
1984. We'll cut that.
Something like that. So yeah, I think it can be very scary, and I think a film like Invasion of the Body Snatchers is especially that last scene. Fuck me, Donald Pleasance like screaming at the camera with his pointing his finger. That's scary, you know.
Poor Veronica Cartwright. Yes. She can't catch a fucking break. Not only did she get packed to bits and her birthday party's ruined in the birds, not only did she get fucked up by a xenomorph, she also gets pointed and laughed at by Donald Pleasance or by Donald Sutherland. It's not fair. I love her in that movie though. I fucking love the 70s one.
Yeah.
Great example of a remake.
Yeah, it's really, really good. It's really good. So yeah, that's I don't know. Did you have any more?
Oh yeah, here we praise individuality, but if you could all just assimilate and like subscribe and share, that would be great.
If you could all
individually
follow
like
our
subscribe
Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. Individuality is great, so join the hive mind and listen to our big show. Pretty much.
We do have a few quick things just before we kind of like wrap this up or whatever. So the first thing obviously is, number one, we have a top 5 selection. Now, considering what we talked about at the beginning, I was reluctant to put in Godzilla or King Kong into this list, but considering does have very strong parallels and the allegories, and it does tease out quite a lot of like the complexities of race, nuclear war, all of these types of things. So I would definitely, for sure, definitely recommend at least one or the other for a top 5 spot.
Victory! I won! You dumb bitch! I fucking won! I've been saying for like not even weeks, for months now, that I would get these fucking 2 creatures on this fucking podcast in some way, shape, or form.
We have fought viciously behind the scenes. So assimilation was a theme that I really wanted to work with, and I did think Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So now this is a top 5 list, not in any order, just it's what we kind of universally kind of came together on. So assimilation, number 1, of course, you have Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Jeff Goldblum and Veronica Cartwright.
Man, like if he was only spread across the table, that would be great.
Also, I think Margot Kidder. I could be wrong, but those are the 4. Remember?
I sort of had a tied spot again between Midsommar and Hereditary for the expression of grief or the deeper meanings of grief. I mentioned
make a great
it earlier.
double feature.
Great double feature, yes, of course. If you want to get fucked up and super depressed, watch Hereditary. If you want to get fucked up and get super high, watch Midsommar. Or
What's
Midsommar.
made that order, though?
Whichever. Don't mix them up. Don't mix them up. Then we have, for at least what I was first talking about, was vegetarianism, which is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Then we have societal feminism. So this is the expression of women should being allowed to do what they want, yet societal norms and oppressive, almost misogynistic culture is pushing her down, and she eventually just becomes Satan's baby mama. And then the last one we call me by my name. I just imagine you now doing that. And
I know when they forgot. I shake this ass for God.
You gotta be working for the man upstairs, okay?
Not Jesus is that, but somebody else.
And then the last one is for the allegory or the symbolism of genocide, which is The Shining. So, for fear of repercussions, just in case anyone doesn't think it's not, the manager literally says the hotel was made on an Indian burial ground. So
they were trying to build it.
Don't tell me we were wrong. Okay. So the last thing we wanted to make a kind of like a big declaration on is, after today's episode is released, the following 3 weeks of retrospective episodes will be cinema, foreign horror.
What a weird way to say that.
Foreign cinema horror movies. Yeah, it's going to be
horror from another land.
Horror from another land, yeah. So we're going to be doing...
Now, I know that we are Irish, but this doesn't include American cinema either.
Yes.
This is everywhere that in America or Ireland.
We're specifically excluding, and England, let's just say it that way. We're specifically excluding, let's just say English speaking. Will we say that?
I was going to say, non-English language horror. Horror with subtitles.
Language. Yeah, so we're talking about places like Italy, French cinema, Spanish, Japan, Korea, Southeast Asia, like loads of these things. Like I want to get into J-horror, and I'm super into that. So...
and what's exciting about this is that we are going to pick the first 2 of the week, and we are going to leave the 3rd of the month up to you guys.
So you have 2 times where you can decide what we do. Yay! I get that little baby.
On our work off on the fans.
We're literally I'm literally going to try and add in all those little children clapping and going yay.
Okay, you do it.
Yeah. So thank you guys for listening to The SLAB. A podcast where their original podcast, I should say, where we probe, postulate, and I don't know the
prostate.
Other one. And prostate.
Topic.
Prostate
My
exam
favorite.
topic.
My favorite.
Thanks for listening, guys. Let us know what you think as well. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and all that shit. So, yeah.
You're not getting an Unpleasant Dreams. That's their exclusive.
Oh, thank fuck.
Whatever. Maybe a shitty joke in place.
Oh,